of the school committee. I don't see Kathy yet, though. So we'll wait a minute. Shalini.
I want to apologize in advance. My computer is still doing some weird things every once in a while. So if my video suddenly turns off,
So we're recording now, correct?
We are recording.
Thank you. Good evening. It's January 23rd, 2023. There are two meetings tonight. The first is a special meeting of the Town Council, where we are joined by the Finance Committee, the School Committee, and the Elementary School Building Committee. This will be followed by a regular meeting of the Town Council using the same link. On November 7th, 2022, an act was signed into law, which extends the open meeting law and allows us to meet virtually. Because of the weather tonight, we've chosen to do that. This meeting is accessible in real time via Zoom, by phone, and on Amherst Media. Given that we have a quorum of the council present, I'm calling the January 23rd, 2023 special town council meeting to order at 5:33. I'm going to go through counselors to make sure you can hear us and we can hear you. And then I'll ask the heads of each of the other committees to do the same. Shalini Balmilne.
Present.
Pat DeAngelis.
Present.
Anna Devlin Gauthier.
present.
Lynn Griesmer is present. Mandy Jo Haneke.
Present.
Anika Lopes.
Present.
Michelle Miller.
Present.
Dorothy Pam.
Here.
Pam Rooney.
Here.
Kathy Shane. Andy Steinberg.
Present.
Jennifer Taub.
Present.
Alicia Walker.
Present.
I'll now call on Andy Steinberg, Chair of the Amherst Town Council Finance Committee, to call the other members of the Finance Committee to order.
Okay. I want to note that it's an 8-member committee. A quorum is present because a quorum is 5, including the 3 resident members. And I'm going to just call on them because you've already called on the other members of the committee, and one member, I believe, Councillor Walker is not yet present, but Bernie Kubiak.
Present.
Matt Holloway. Matt, can you?
Present. Present.
And Bob Hagner.
Present.
So the meeting is called to order for the Finance Committee. Lynn, back to you.
Thank you. Allison McDonald, please call the school committee members to order and make sure they can hear and be heard.
Seeing a presence of a quorum of the Amherst School Committee, I'm calling to order that meeting at 5:35 p.m. on Monday, January 3rd. And please state present when I call your name. Peter.
Peter present.
Ben.
Ben present.
Jennifer.
Here.
Allison present. And I thought I saw Irv. Irv?
You thought you saw me. I'm here.
Thank you. And back over to you, Lynn.
Thank you. And Kathy Shane, I don't know if you have that many members of the building committee present. I know you'll be recognizing them later and perhaps you can check and see that at that time. Kathy?
Yeah, Lynn, I'm looking, we don't have a quorum of the committee. Alicia Walker is on the committee, as is Paul and Sean, and they're here, and Jonathan is also here, Selvin, but I don't have enough to call the committee to order.
Okay, just keep an eye out for that. There's no chat room for this meeting. If we have technical difficulties, please let me or Athena know. To make a comment or to ask a question, please click the raised hand button. If technical difficulties arise as a result of utilizing remote participation, we'll decide how to address that at the time, including the possibility of having to suspend the meeting. Athena will be monitoring to make sure connections stay steady. With sincere gratitude and all to who have brought us to this point, Andy, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to correct one thing I said. Alicia's present, so we have all members of the committee present.
Thank you. With sincere gratitude to all who have brought us to this point, I'm calling upon Kathy Shane as chair of the Elementary School Building Committee to proceed with the introductions of our guests and the presentations.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn. Athena, if you can put up my slides, that will make it easier for me. While she's putting them up, the first slide just basically says what I'm going to say. I'm delighted to be able to present on behalf of the building committee. And I did see that Ben Harrington is also here. Several of our committee members are on the panel and on the school committee or town staff. And they've asked me to do the brief overview. Next slide. My role tonight, as I talk about this key juncture that we're asked, we are about building a new elementary school. As you're going to hear tonight, we have the opportunity to build for the future, for our children, for our community, and for our climate. I'm going to give a very brief overview of the project and its status. Then Donna Danisco will follow me, that she represents Danisco Design Architects, who have been our wonderful design team that's been working with us throughout the last year plus. And she will go through much more on the site design and the rationale for design, both external and internal to the building. She will end with a brief summary of project costs, followed by Margaret Wood from Answer Advisory. And Margaret is our owner's project manager. And for those of you who don't know that that person does, and I didn't before I was on this committee, she helps us stay on track, making sure we file the paperwork necessary to ultimately, we hope, get a Massachusetts School Building Authority grant. And you see here the list of the 13 members of the committee. This is a hardworking committee that has had to make a lot of tough decisions and weigh off choices. Next slide, please. Throughout, what we've been focused on is education first. We have an opportunity due to the very low enrollment, the declining enrollment in our elementary school, which also percolates to the middle and the high school, is to combine two schools into one school. This means Amherst will have two elementary schools rather than three. We're doing this in buildings that were built for a much earlier era, when insulation was not important, when energy costs didn't matter, when people didn't think about light in classrooms and throughout the school. And the schools are underused because enrollment has gone down. The building that you will hear described tonight is looking to the future with a student-centered, teacher-informed design that will meet our educational needs now, but it's also very flexible. So we, as educational programs change or as needs change, the actual internal and external design will allow for that. The selection of the Fort River site as a place to build the school provides robust opportunity for outdoor learning and play, not just inside, but learning about the environment when kids are outside, taking classrooms outside. We're building the first net zero energy design building, first public net zero, and this complies with our bylaw, but it's a highly energy efficient building, meaning well insulated with cost conscious choice of materials throughout. And it will be all electric with the electricity costs offset by solar voltaic. We expect to save at least $250,000 a year in utility costs alone by consolidating the two buildings and moving to this building design. Throughout, there's been a focus on costs. One of the reasons for the Fort River site, aside from the amount of land, was we were able to build a building while the current school stays open without much disruption in the existing school. One school, as I mentioned, will save operating costs, and we're expecting to get a facility grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority that will offset at least part of the town costs, but we will not know the details of that till the end of April. The size of the school, the size of the project, given everything else we have going on in town, will require us to go out for a debt exclusion vote to pay for the town share, at least a large portion of the town share. And that vote we've scheduled right now on May 2nd. We are seeking to do a lot of community outreach. There are 2 forums this week, the morning of the 25th of January and the evening of the 26th. We're also taking this out to district meetings and many other additional outreach meetings. So that is my very quick summary. We are at the point of a well-designed school, but not ready to build the school, where we need to be talking about the next step of getting the financing in. And I'm going to, Lynn, if it's okay, we go right to Donna. I think that was the plan. So I'm going to be,
Please.
I'm going to be, Donna's will be operating her own presentation. As I said, Donna is our leader on Donesco Design, and she's going to put more pictures behind the words that I just spoke. Donna.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see this?
I can, so I think that
Okay.
others
Can you, any chance you can see my mouse?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh, so it worked. I don't know what we did wrong in school committee, but awesome. So it's easier to use my mouse. So good evening. I too, like Kathy, I'm just so delighted to be with you tonight and also where we are with the project. I cannot echo everything Kathy said, especially the fact that thank you to everyone that has dedicated their time into making this such an amazing school. So again, recognizing it as a school, that the first and most important thing is to understand the educational program. And we are committed to doing that. The program has not changed since the school committee voted on that. It's hard to believe it's been a year. With the program of 70,500 net floor area, which is the area inside the building, and the total gross square footage of the building is 105,750 square feet. So over the past year, we have spent so much time talking with the educators about spatial relationships and adjacencies, where the programs go next to each other, how they work together to maximize time on learning and make this an extremely efficient and compact building, as well as flexible, which is equally important. All right, now I'm not going to the next slide. I'm moving my mouse around, but all right, here we go. Sorry about that. So here's the Fort River site. And as you can see, what's dotted or hashed in is your existing building. Single story, 80,000 square feet. What we're doing is we're designing the new building to the south of this, and we've moved it as far south as we possibly could to allow the operations of the existing building to remain without interruption of the construction, and even have outdoor areas for play and activity behind the school. There'll be a fence that will separate the site from construction to school. And what you'll see here is we spent a lot of time developing areas for play, for outdoor learning, as well as a safe arrival and departure. The southern entrance will be the bus loop. We have sufficient area to line up 12 buses and an area that we can have a pull-off area for vans, as we understand those students need additional time for arriving and departing. The northern entrance will actually be for vehicles, for cars, for parking, and for student drop-off. There's ample space for student drop-off without commingling with buses. And then once the new school is built, the students will move into it. And then again, the fence will remain. And the northern part of the site will be in construction, where the building will be demolished. And you'll see these incredible opportunities for community fields. So this may look familiar. It's an extremely compact and efficient floor plan, and that's always been the goal. The main entrance is to the west, with the green is the administration wing, which will welcome visitors entering the building. The first part of the building is the community wing, gymnasium and cafetorium. It's a cafeteria with the stage, which will connect to the fields beyond. And then we have the academic wing, which can actually be closed off while the community wing is in use. So it provides separation and safety, and folks don't have to wander beyond where they're supposed to be. You'll see that we have a very efficient but yet collaborative approach to the learning environments. We have 5 classrooms per grade, and 3 classrooms will be clustered around a project area, which allows for individual and small group instruction, as well as project-based learning. But it was really important to have the 5 classrooms be in close proximity to each other to allow for that collaboration throughout the grade. In addition, you'll see that we have 2 grades per floor, which as well will allow for vertical and horizontal collaboration between staff and students. We've spent an inordinate amount of time talking about the special education spaces, not only what's important as far as the size of the spaces, but the location so they can serve all students. On the second floor, the academic wing is identical to the first. The goal was to make this a very efficient and easy and manageable layout. To the west, we have what we're calling the STEM area. We have a media center, an art room, and a science, technology, and engineering space. So we see this as a great opportunity for a lot of activity occurring inside the spaces, but also in the corridor area. The academic wing, very similar to the first floor, 2 grades. Here we're showing 2nd and 3rd grade, again with the special education programs appropriate for those age groups. And then moving upstairs to the 3rd floor, it's primarily the 4th and 5th graders. So we like to say as they rise in stature in the school, they will also do so within the building. And again, it just allows for flexible learning, collaboration, and the appropriate special ed spaces. So we're going to show you a little bit of a teaser, I guess, as we start taking you throughout the building and around the building and into the building. Here's a view of the building from the drop-off loop as you approach the front of the school. And again, recognizing this is a 3-story building, which is somewhat unique to Amherst, it was really important to break down the scale of the building. As you come around to the north side of the building, you'll see that natural light was really important. It helps break down the scale, but it also provides a lot of daylight and views once you're in the building. You see the cafetorium and glass, and above that is the media center. And what was really important to us was to provide a really cost-effective but durable exterior. So we're using masonry throughout the entire exterior, but you can see we're having fun with it. We're playing with it in colors so that it can provide a whimsical feel as we really just want to embrace this important elementary school. As we come around the site, you'll see again, this very compact footprint really allows the Fort River site to open up and be embraced by the entire community. We've strategically located play areas separate from the outdoor learning areas. And as you come around the building, you'll see this is the south-facing portion of the building, and we have sunshades because we want the views and the natural light to enter the building, but we needed to reduce the glare. And then as we move further towards the front of the building, we have the student drop-off area and a nice welcoming area as they arrive by bus. And then as we approach the gym, we intentionally have left it blank because we're envisioning some kind of mural that's already been displayed at the existing Fort River School. And then you'll see the administration at the front of the building, which has oversight from the buses, students arriving by bus, parents, and visitors. As we enter the building, we have the main office again at the very front. We have the principal's office who wants to see and be seen, which is fabulous. We've thought about all of the areas, you'll see blank walls, because that's for future student art or even local artists. We have the gymnasium on the right, again, bringing natural light in, but not getting in your eyes as you take a basketball shot. And then as you come around, again, a lot of natural light coming in, utilizing windows with views of the cafeteria and looking out onto the site. And then as we start, I'll take you to the academic spaces. So here's a view of a typical project area with 3 classrooms surrounding it, individual lockers for each of the students with ample storage for staff. Again, utilizing glass to bring the natural light in to even these spaces that do not have direct access to light or outdoors. It was important that we also provided views so that everyone has an opportunity to maintain that connection to the outdoors as you look through these large glass side lights. Inside the classroom, it's total flexibility for differentiated learning. We have 2 sinks even for project-based learning. And then again, entering out into the project areas, you'll see that we wanted some quietness. So we broke off those areas from the main corridor, but we wanted to maintain that connection to the classrooms to the other side. So that there's a real nice cohesive feel for each grade. As we enter what we call the hub of the school, the media center, with this beautiful natural light overlooking the fields. And this is a north view, so it's great for the daylighting and views. Flexible stacks as we go around. We have a storytelling area, again, bringing light into the corridors. And then we just find this just such an amazing opportunity for the generations of Amherst students. Now, let me see if I can advance this. It's not wanting me to advance. Maybe this is where we stop. I can't seem to advance my slide. Hold on one second. That's not letting me advance my slide. 1 second. I don't know why I cannot advance my slides. I'm gonna I'm gonna have to go old school here. So, as Kathy stated, what you probably couldn't see in the video was that this is Amherst's first net zero energy building, utilizing ground source heat pumps and PVs to generate renewable energy, both on the roof and also canopies in the parking lot. But what's also hidden behind the walls is the energy efficient distribution system. It's extremely well insulated, again, maximizing daylight and minimizing glare. We spent a lot of time even talking about how to reduce water consumption. We'll have electric vehicle charging station infrastructure, thermal comfort, and we didn't stop there. What was important is how are we going to manage this 80,000 square feet of building that we have to demolish? So we will have a waste management system in place as well for construction and demolition. So we are pleased, so excited that we are on a path to achieve a LEED Gold status. So as it relates to construction, and I'm sure everyone has heard how construction continues to escalate. Our current construction cost, I'm going to round here, is approximately $86,700,000. We've spent with the school building committee for the past few weeks looking at opportunities to reduce cost without impacting the intent of the design or the educational program. And we're thankful for finding approximately $5.3 million to reduce the overall cost. So the total construction currently is around $81,300,000. And with that, I think we're going to turn this over to Margaret.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, I'm going to pick it up from there. And I want to piggyback on what Donna was saying is we're showing you numbers tonight because the way we do the work, and actually I would say the way the DNISCO does the work, everything is sort of looking like it's kind of finished, but actually it's not. So there's a lot more design work to do. And the budget numbers that we're sharing represent numbers that really should be rounded, but they're coming out of a project budget worksheet, which is going to be going into the submittal. So I just want people to sort of understand these numbers are more rounded than they look, but you will see them in a version of the spreadsheet as we finalize the agreement with the MSBA. So I'm going to talk about the overall total project budget, if everybody can see this. The components of it are, Donna's talked about this line, which is the so-called hard construction cost, the cost of the building. So, but in addition to that, there are also soft costs associated with it. And they're really in three big categories, which are played out here. There are fees for services. So myself as the OPM and my firm, Donna's firm as the designer, and a big team of consultants at every level. And then some, other miscellaneous costs, including testing and moving and other pieces. Then there is a budget line item for furnishings, equipment, and technology. And the MSBA subsidizes all of these to some extent, but they don't subsidize any of them fully. We have, for the purposes of this budget, Donna and I have agreed to use $1,850 per student for furnishings and $1,650 per student for technology. It's possible before we make the final submission, those numbers may want to be a little higher, but Donna and I agreed in discussion that it was a good placeholder. Then the last big bucket is contingencies. So the contingencies are what protect the community from unforeseens. And in this case, there are contingencies that are already in the hard construction number for escalation and the development of the design. But outside of that budget, there is also a construction contingency. The construction contingency is typically for things that come up in the field that result in changes to the construction process or materials. And in this case, we are recommending that the town carry 5% of construction. So this number is literally derived from 5% of that. And then a equivalent soft cost contingency of 1% of construction, and that's for additional services or fees or other consultant costs that might be required. So when you add up these numbers, the hard costs and the soft costs, you're at 97.9, which I really do not think we should be saying anything other than 98 million in the spirit of what I was saying earlier about these numbers being rounded. I just want to note that the feasibility costs are actually outside of this budget because they were separately funded and won't be part of this bonding process. But I would like everybody to carry away the number of 98 million and not the number 97,967,047. So then this same complex budget document, the MSBA uses the basis of their reimbursement in drafting that. It was very recently revised. Some of you may remember that at the end of December, the MSBA bumped up their reimbursement a bit, which has actually helped us here. When I plug in all the numbers that we know now into that spreadsheet as an estimate, I get a maximum grant of, again, we could call this 43 million probably. And then that town share is a little over 55 million. Now, Donna also had in her spreadsheet, and I've carried here the half percent for art. So if you come down here, 55.5, again, you think about rounding these numbers is probably a reasonable number to sort of hold and talk about in the public sector. So I just want to ask, well, let me show the second slide here that I have. So obviously now that we've got a concrete design and budget on the table, the next big topic is going to be how it gets paid for. So I just wanted to summarize here. Here's that number from the prior spreadsheet, again, 55.5. There are a couple of potential sources of funding that could reduce the town's share of the bond. And one of them is very clear. Kathy, I think, touched on it, that because of the energy performance, the net zero commitment of the building is carrying out, there's about 1.6 million of rebates, which are basically coming off the town's share of the cost. There are some CPA funds that have been applied for. And then a big question mark, which I'm sure we'll have further discussions about. You may be aware that there are federal tax credits, new federal tax credits for the use of photovoltaics, but the federal government has not yet published how those are going to be calculated. So we really can't put a number to that yet. So that is the extent of my presentation. Len, I think, do you wanted to talk about the schedule now or later?
We will, but first
Okay.
of all, thank you, all of you. Kathy, I am going to ask you to call the elementary school building committee to order, check with the people who have not already said they can hear and be heard. And we will note that we did have a quorum of that committee at 5:45.
Thank you, Lynn. What I'm going to call out, there are 7 members of the committee here, but several of them have already been, including 2 counselors, Alicia Walker and I are both on the committee. I'm just going to call out the people who have not already been confirmed. And that I'm going to start with Jonathan Salvin and just say that you can hear and be heard.
Here.
Ben Harrington. Oh, he was already called on, but Paul Bockerman. Here we go.
Here.
Sean Magnano
Here.
and Allison Estes.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. Lynn, I just wanted to add something at the end of costs, since many people know I'm on the finance committee, and it's probably would be my instinct anyway, but a couple of things. Margaret talked about the contingencies built in on top of direct costs. There are also contingencies built into the initial number on design costs so that the town is protected and there's an inflation factor on two ends of this. And those Eversource energy credits, we're scheduled to have ground source heat pumps as a major source of the HVAC system. The big chunk of that is because we chose ground source. Eversource recognizes it's a very efficient way to heat and cool a building. And that's real money. Literally, when we build it, they will give us the money if there's because of what we've built as the efficiency of the building. So some of the others we don't know yet, as Margaret said, but there is a federal credit for ground source heat pumps as well as for photovoltaic, potentially. And these are big. What the law said is it's 30% of the costs. So we will see what eventually emerges. And I will stop there. I've just been focusing on how do we pay for it a lot. And those numbers have been jumping off the page.
Thank you. So this is an opportunity for the bodies that are present to ask any clarifying questions. But I really want to note this is just the beginning of the discussion. There will be an intense period of discussion between now and the time that we actually go out for the debt override. I also want to note that there are 16 people in the audience, and that does not count all of those people who watch us on Amherst Media. So I see a hand up already, and it's Bob Hegner from the Finance Committee.
Yes, I just had a question. I did not see the demolition and waste management costs for the existing structure. Are they included in your budget, or are they separate?
Yep, nope, they're included.
They're in the construction number, Bob.
Okay, thank you.
Mandy Jo Haneke.
Yes, thanks. Looking at the expected grant, you told us that 42.7 million is approximately the maximum we could get. That's about 43% of the project cost. So I was thrilled to see that number, but we have been operating on a 30 to 40% assumption of sort of reimbursement. So I'm curious what the minimum estimated grant number might be. How much lower than 42.7 might it go when we finally get numbers?
So also a great question. It's a little hard to estimate because the way the process, more specifically at this time, the way the process works is the MSBA takes our spreadsheet and they go through and they may find, I don't believe they will, but they could find items to exclude, small amounts of square footage, things that we don't know are on the table right now. But this is really based on, the assumption that everything that we have discussed so far is reimbursed consistent with their guidelines.
And Mandy, Margaret, you might add, it's the lower number was before MSBA did their revisions in December, that lower percent.
Yeah, it was lower before December 21st.
Right. Donna, you had your hand up. Was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Nope, just, you got it.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
So Mandy asked my question, which made me feel better because I was worried it was a silly question. And then Mandy asked it, so I know it wasn't. But the follow up on that is, so what I'm hearing you say is, well, there is possibly a minimum number that's slightly different than what's on the sheet there. You have been really focused on what MSBA guidelines are, so you're not expecting anything different. When will we know for certain? When is that kind of point where they go through every single thing?
So they will take this, behind this calculation is a big complex spreadsheet, which I typically share with them as a draft, but they don't typically respond to it until we make the schematic design submission. And then they will, shortly after we make the submission, within a couple of weeks, they will ask us to join project funding agreement review, and they'll go through with us whether they have any other comments. So again, I have to just compliment Danisco, who's been incredibly good about being specific about making sure that the areas that are the MSBA kind of caps on areas are that they are consistent with that, as well as I think being very creative around, how to use the MSBA guidelines to make something that fits for the community. But we're not likely to get a whole lot more specificity about it until I would say middle of March, probably at the earliest.
Paul, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to note that these are our estimates of what the MSBA will give us. This is not a number that MSBA has provided to us. It's well informed as people who built these buildings before using the MSBA guidelines. MSBA looks at this as a partnership with the town of Amherst. They're not just a funding authority. They work with us in the design and the development of the building. So they really truly see us as partners. But this is our number. The MSBA, if you said, "Hey, it looks like you're giving this amount of money," the MSBA will say, "No, we haven't even
Yeah,
exactly. So I just wanted to put a caveat on that, and I think Sean might want to add to that as well.
Yeah,
Sean.
just add one more complication. The final numbers will be when we get construction bids,
Yeah.
and we actually know what the contract is, which that'll be many months from now.
Thank you all. Nice, simple answer. Thank you.
Are there other questions from members of the other bodies that are with us tonight? Pam Rooney.
I just want to say thanks to the building committee and the team because that's a beautiful looking building. I'm very excited about this. I had a couple of thoughts as we were going through this presentation. I like the fact that it's under 100 million, that you've worked hard to get it in that range. And I would really like to I would like to go to the townspeople for that exclusion override, knowing that we're under that number. So good work. Keep the pressure on. One of the numbers that you presented were the soft costs, and I'm more familiar with soft cost numbers in the 25%. At the university, it was more like 30% soft cost, and I'm wondering how you are able to estimate it at 20%. I think I'd rather see a number that is accurate than hoping to keep it low. If you understand what I'm saying.
I do. Pam, I'm happy to speak to that a little bit. There are a couple of reasons that it's lower than 25%. And as you will know, those who looked closely at the PSR estimates, we were using 25%. But one of the big moves, I mean, the architects have this huge piece of kind of moving the design along. My piece is to move the soft cost piece along. So if you think about the soft cost numbers, I think the construction contingency numbers are very straightforward. It's a percentage. And I think I'd be interested in your opinion about whether, for instance, construction should be higher than 5%, but it's tied up with, what's assumed in the construction budget. I think the two numbers that, as I mentioned earlier, the furnishings, equipment, and technology number, I think could be higher. This was an educated guess and sort of back and forth between Donna, myself, and the furnishings consultant about what that number should be. But at a certain level, it becomes a budget number that you set and say, we're either going to be in it or outside of it. I think the two things that are contributing the most to it being less than 25% are, first of all, I think the escalation in construction costs does not necessarily mean that the fees this is just sort of the reality of the last couple of years. Construction costs have gone up like this. Fees have gone up because salaries have gone up, but they haven't gone up as much. So that's part of it. The other piece of this is that the feasibility cost, which is $1 million, is outside of it.
What do you mean by outside of what?
So the fees, maybe I'll pull the slide up again just to explain this. So when I'm calculating 20%, I'm not including this line.
Mhm.
Okay. And that's because I was asked to sort of describe it as a percentage of this, but actually, obviously, if you include, $1 million, that bumps it up as well. And that's because the MSBA won't reimburse on that because it's a redo of the previous project. And the way it was funded is separate and outside of the bonding. So, I think in a nutshell, I would say that the other thing that's probably impacting it is it's a very, in many ways, and again, hats off to Danisco for figuring out how to build a building on the site of an existing building. It's a fairly straightforward schedule, which reduces, overall costs, at least reduces them on the OPM side, because the duration is more limited than if you had a multi-phase project. So
Thank you.
complicated answer. I think we could definitely, and we may look at bumping up the furnishings cost, but that's, we haven't had a presentation on that with the building committee yet.
Right. Yeah. And then encouragement to the committee and the designers to seek out every possible grant that's out there. I think that's terrific.
Right. Sean, you have your hand up. I assume that was to augment an answer.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. I just want to clarify that the feasibility study, we are planning to pay back through our capital budget. So we're not proposing to lump that in with the debt exclusion. It'll be just through our regular capital process.
The council's already voted that amount. Irv Rhodes.
I really want to thank Sean for making sure that we came back to reality, that the final cost of this and what we're going to be facing really awaits the final bids. And I also want to remind people that this is a construction project. There are always uncertainties in relationship to budgeting and bids. Bids are the reality. And when those bids are in, that's what our reality is. Right now, this is pre-reality.
Donna, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, and you're both right, Irv, 100%. The only other thing, just to remind people, we will be continuing to do cost checks. We'll have a cost estimate done at the end of design development, and then 2 during construction document. So we'll continue to be, cross-checking the market, making sure that if we have to make adjustments, we make adjustments as the market shifts. So it's not, here's our budget, see you at construction. We have three more opportunities for kind of a reality check with what's going on in the market for over the next year or so.
Thank you. Andy?
Yeah, I guess I have 2 questions. One is, we know that one of the disadvantages of the Fort River site was the nature of the land that it sits on, and that it's been, very wet on the current school. In the way the current school is built, it caused a lot of problems. And I understand a lot of work is going to need to be done to get the ground ready for the construction to avoid that happening again. And is that included just in the construction costs itself, or is there another place that shows up? So that is one. And the other is for both Don and Margaret, you've built a lot of schools, been involved in a lot of projects. Where typically do unexpected costs come from, and how have you factored that in?
So, Donna, do you want to start? and I'll add on, or should we?
Sure. So as it relates to site development costs, Andy, yes, those are included in the construction budget. We have a real good, solid understanding of everything that is required for the development and protection of the site. So those are already included in the construction cost. So Danisco's been in business for over 40 plus years. I am not that old, but some of my family members were. But we have been designing educational facilities for 40 plus years. Our documents are extremely solid, and we have a vast experience in Chapter 149 or public construction in Massachusetts. Our change orders, I think that's where we're going. Where's the unknowns in this? Our change orders typically represent less than 1% of the construction cost, mostly related to site. So we've done a very thorough job on the site, and we really think we have a really good understanding of it. We have the rest of design to further understand it if we'll continue to develop the documents, but typically it's this unknowns on the site is where we'll start seeing a little bit of cost unknowns or change orders.
So I'm gonna just chime in and say, and I do agree, I think Danisco has a very good reputation for their design documentation, which can be a source of change orders. It is like, I agree with Donna, it is likely here that it's going to be soft costs costs that are related to the site and its complexity. But I do think the market has created a situation where there can also be timing issues and availability issues. So, for instance, in the last year, the availability and cost of a lot of electrical equipment has become kind of crazy. And so, we could end up in a situation where somebody bids on something, it needs to be installed at a certain time, and suddenly it can't be available at that time. Now, in general, one might say, well, that's that just means we're going to take longer, but I think it's possible there could be additional costs that we will have to consider during construction. It's not something I can predict or have a crystal ball for now, that are related to the ability to sort of stay on a certain set schedule.
Okay. Dorothy, Pam?
In this plan, is there an elevator to the second and third floor for handicapped students and teachers who may have a temporary handicap, say from a surgery or something like that?
Yeah, it's a code requirement.
Okay. And security systems, I maybe you've talked about that and I've missed it, but are they built cost in at this time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna take a last call for any other questions. Again, reminding people that this is just the beginning of a discussion. In fact, later tonight during the regular town council meeting, we'll be talking about specific dates that are important to the council and the actions we have to take in order to move this forward to the public vote. So any other final questions? Never final. Any other questions? Kathy?
I don't have a question, but I just want to encourage anyone who's not regularly attending our building committee meetings. We can and do receive questions, comments, and it doesn't have to be at the meeting, and we make an attempt to address them so that if something occurs to you later, if you just send it to me and it's something the designers can answer. We've also taken to, when we get a question that isn't answered during the meeting, during public comment, we've tried to get the answer put into our minutes. So to make sure that we close the loop, because this is, we're seeking we've had both good questions and good suggestions that have led to changes. You know, I mean, it's been a really amazing process for me. So I encourage you to send them in if something encouraged you later.
And Kathy, would you just point out the specific website for the project?
Yeah, the place that you can get all the detailed information. So some of you asked on what's the site cost, is demolition, is the building committee site on the town website, and that's the elementary school building. And if you have a question, I can tell you exactly what day we talked about it, and we're posting that. Then there's a larger project site, and Margaret, you'll have to, it's amherst-school-project.com, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly pull them both up. So this is the town site that will link you to all of the agendas and minutes. And then we also have a website for the project that's more sort of a summary for people who are perhaps coming to this relatively new, and that's amherst-school-project.com. And it has, you can see there's a link to the upcoming building project forum. There's a little bit of a timeline. There's a couple of different levels of explanation of background, thanks to some of you who are on here who were involved with helping generate some of the content, including hats off to Kathy and Allison, who generated the set of frequently asked questions that are on here now. So,
okay. Allison, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to point out, and Margaret, you were just showing that, but there's 2 public forums that are coming up this week. One, I believe, is Wednesday morning at 8:30, and the other is Thursday evening at 6:30. Yeah, and those links to join were on that website that Margaret just showed us.
Yeah, there's a link on the first page, and also if you go to the Get Involved page, and this link is live, and there's no one there now, but later this week there will be.
Okay. Pam Rooney.
Thank you. That just answered my question. I sent out a nice email update to District 4, and I included the incorrect time for Wednesday. I thought it was 8:30 p.m. I will have to send it out and correct to 8:30 a.m. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to ask Andy to adjourn the Town Council Finance Committee.
It's adjourned.
Allison to adjourn the Amherst School Committee.
The Amherst School Committee is adjourned.
Kathy to adjourn the Elementary School Building Committee.
We are adjourned.
And while the special meeting of the Town Council is adjourned, we will immediately move on. And at 6:30 in 2 minutes, we will begin the regular meeting of the Town Council utilizing the same link. Thank you all for being here for this opening presentation of a very important discussion for Amherst. Good evening. It's January 23rd, 2023. This is the regular meeting of the Town Council. We have already gone through all the preliminaries, including the fact that we're allowed to do this based on state law. I'm going to state that given that we have a quorum of the council present, I'm calling the council meeting to order at 6:30. I've already checked to make sure that people can hear and be heard. And so we're going to save a little bit of time with that and go immediately on to the announcements. Tina? So we have various committee meetings that are coming up. These will be organizational committee meetings for all 4 of the town councils committees, at which point we will elect the chair and vice chair. The committee assignments were made just this past week. And also note here the elementary school community forums that were just mentioned. The Lunar New Year celebration on Sunday, January 29th is from 11 to 2 at the Amherst Regional Middle School. I also want to note that your packet includes the required annual report for the Amherst Housing Authority, thus completing all the required reports as described in the charter. We're going to move on to the hearing regarding the Eversource petition for the pole placement at 133 Southeast Street. Tina, is there a person in the audience?
Yes, Jesse Martin is coming in. He's our Eversource rep for this hearing.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Jesse. Jesse, is there anything particular you would like to say about this? We do have a memo in our packet, and we do have a recommendation from the head of DPW. So anything particular you would like to say about this additional poll?
No, I'm curious what you guys have to say.
Okay. Are there questions from counselors? Pam Rooney.
Thanks. In looking at the
You just muted yourself, Pam. There you go.
in looking at the diagram provided, it wasn't clear to me why an additional pole was needed and why essentially a loop had to be created to the new building, why it couldn't have been taken, the power to the building couldn't have just been taken off the existing pole 127-14.
Yeah, it has to do with the size of the building being constructed, and we need 2 options to be able to feed it in case one of the feeders crossing the streets is damaged in, say, a car accident or something like that. Anything more than 30 meters, 30 occupants needs to have two feeds to it. So we call it a loop feed. So you're right, it looks just like it's going around, but really it'll be fed from one side, and then if something happens to that initial feed, we have something to revert to keep them powered up.
Okay. Mandy Jo?
Yeah, two questions. The first is with new buildings, I'm curious why you couldn't go underground with these under the roadway. To avoid, so I would understand the addition of maybe pole 127-14M, but why couldn't everything else go underground instead of above ground? And then my other question is, our report from the DPW indicated that there's a big water main under Southeast Street on the west side of the street where 2 of those new poles are going. And so I wanted to know how far away from the water main are these poles being installed?
Okay, so putting them underground is an option if the town will allow us to cut the road. Typically, the town doesn't like us to cut up new roads and trench across them. So if that's something that as a group you guys would like to do, we can talk about that. I was not aware of the water main. That's why we stake the poles, and then before we install them, we use DigSafe to locate where they should go, and also obviously input from the town, so we can adjust them as needed.
Mindy Jo, for follow-up questions?
I guess I'd just like to hear from, I don't think Guilford's here. I think Paul might be texting him about whether we could get the 2 poles eliminated by putting the feed underground from both poles. And then what about the water main issue? And do we know how close it is? Since the water main doesn't show on the plans we got.
Okay. Paul, I'm going to give you a little moment here, and at this point ask, are there any other questions from counselors? And seeing none, then I'm going to ask, are there questions or public comments from the audience? Okay, I'm seeing none from the audience, but I am seeing a hand up for Anna Devlin Gothier.
So I generally am a fan of putting utilities underground wherever it's possible. And like Mandy mentioned, maybe this is a place where that is possible. I think my question is not necessarily for you, Jesse. It's kind of more for us. If it's required to rip up the road in order to put things underground, that makes sense. Who pays for that? And how does that factor into our decision to possibly start putting utilities underground where that's feasible? And I don't know where to direct that question, to be honest with you. I think it might be a Guilford question, or if someone else happens to know the answer. But what are we getting into if we do ask for that? I will put it out to the universe, and if anyone knows the answer, I'm happy to hear it. But if not, I will somehow dig that answer up. No pun intended. Sorry.
I will. No pun intended. Let's
was a good
assume
pun,
that
though.
Paul is going to answer that question or tell us when he can answer it. Dorothy?
I just wanted to join Mandy Jo in supporting the move to put poles underlined or put utilities underlined wherever possible, and to think of aesthetics, not just because I know there's this tendency to keep adding poles all over town, and there's more stuff that's going to be happening, and it's just going to end up being very, very unattractive looking. And so I think we should start. So I think Anna asked some very good questions also, where the cost goes, but if it's possible, I think we should work towards putting some of our utilities underground. Thank you.
So Paul, I see you've returned, and I wonder if you have any additional information.
Yeah, so it's fine for DPW to go underground as long as the road gets patched to DPW specifications, so that the road, it's returned to its normal state. And so DPW can work with Eversource to make sure that the lines are underground.
And who pays for that was one of the questions asked while you were getting the answer to the first one.
We don't pay, the town wouldn't pay for that. That's Eversource's bill.
Yeah, it would fall back to our-
Eversource.
it would fall back to our customer, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so Eversource would have to pay for the installation and the repair of the digging up and the repair of the road.
Yeah, not Eversource, the customer, the
The
person
customer.
building the building. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Paul, was there anything else?
No.
Okay, Mandy Jo?
I guess I was just curious, Paul, were you able to get a quick answer from Guilford about if we kept those poles on the west side, how far away from the main they would be? And then the other question would be, if we go underground, is the main a problem for going underground?
Yeah, I did ask that question. Eversource works around water lines and all the time. They'll be able to figure that out.
Yeah, typically a water main is 6 to 7 feet underground typically. And our electric conduits are 3 feet. Typically.
But I did ask that question specifically, and he said that they'll be able to figure it out. Not a big deal.
So are there any other questions from counselors? Then my question back is, are we ready to close the public hearing? Not seeing any objection to that. We will be voting on this later. We don't vote on it during the hearing. Right, so is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. And we'll just move to a quick vote. Shalini Bell-Milne,
Yes. Yes.
Pat DeAngelis,
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier,
Aye.
Lynn Griesemer's an aye, Mandy Jo Haneke,
Aye.
Anika Lopes,
Aye.
Michelle Miller,
Aye.
Dorothy Pam,
Yes.
Pam Rooney,
Aye.
Kathy Shane,
Yes.
Andy Steinberg,
Aye.
Jennifer Taub,
Aye.
and Alicia Walker. Okay,
Aye.
thank you. We are okay. The hearing is closed. And Jesse, thank you for joining us. And I'm sure that Guilford will be back in touch with you as we move forward with whatever the action is that the council takes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. We're going to now move to general public comment. This is the only public comment this evening. And I'll note that there are 14 people in the audience at this time. And I would like to ask you to raise your hand if you would like to make general public comment. Again, I'm going to ask one more time. Is there anybody who would like to make general public comment? Seeing no hands, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Following items were selected because they were considered to be routine and it was reasonable to expect they would pass with no controversy. To remove an item, you will let me know that after we go through the first read. It does not require a second. When we then do the second, it will include all of those that will be removed. I'm going to already note that there has been one change since the initial publishing, and that is we are not approving the November 14, 2022 special town council meeting minutes tonight. Okay, so the motion is following: to move the following items in printed motions thereunder and approve those items as a single unit. Waiver of Town Council Rules of Procedure 8.6 for items 6A 2023 Black History Month Proclamation and 6B 2023 Lunar New Year Proclamation. 6A, adoption of the 2023 Black History Month Proclamation. 6B, adoption of the 2023 Lunar New Year Proclamation. 8A, approval of Eversource petition to install 3 solely owned poles at 133 Southeast Street. I'm assuming if somebody wants to change that motion, they will have it removed. 8C, approval of long-term parking reservations requisite at 26 Spring Street. I'm sorry, reservation request. 8D, approval of discontinuance of the AccuVote optical scan tabulator and replacement with ImageCast precinct optical tabulator. 9A1, approval of town manager appointment to the Water Supply Protection Committee. And 11A, approval of the following meeting minutes: January 9, 2023, regular town council meeting minutes. Are there any items that people would like removed? Mandy Jo?
8A, the Eversource poll petition, please.
Okay. Are there any others? Seeing none, I'm seeking a second where we remove 8A from the list that you see on the screen. Seeing no other hands, we're going to move.
Second.
I'm sorry, second. Thank you.
I didn't think you needed a second.
It did need a second. The removal didn't need a second. The total motion needed a second, though. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move along. Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
Anna Delvin Gothier.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. Mandy Jo Haneke.
Aye.
Anika Lopes.
Aye.
Michelle Miller.
Aye.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Kathy
Yes.
Shane. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
Jennifer Taub.
Aye.
Alicia Walker.
Aye.
Shalini Bowman.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Okay. Then, as is our custom, we are going to read from the two proclamations we have just passed. And one of the sponsors on the Black History Proclamation is Dorothy Pam, and I've asked her to read the last paragraph.
Is that right now, Lynn?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now therefore, we, the Town Council of the Town of Amherst, do hereby proclaim the month of February in the year of 2023 as Black History Month, and urge all residents to mark this occasion and to participate fittingly in its observance, beginning with the flag-raising ceremony on February 1st, 2023 at 6 p.m. with celebrations and recognitions throughout the month.
Thank you. And I will be sending an email out to all counselors to see who will be able to attend. Mandy Jo Haneke, the 2023 Lunar New Year Proclamation.
Yeah, so I just want to say we send our hearts out to the families who were impacted by the shooting out in the LA area, because it was slightly related to the Lunar New Year celebrations. Before I read this, this is the Spring Festival Lunar New Year Celebration Proclamation. Now therefore, we, the Town Council of the Town of Amherst, do hereby proclaim January 22nd, 2023 as the beginning of the Spring Festival, and urge all residents to join the 15-day celebration of the Year of the Rabbit, beginning with a celebration and reading of the town's Spring Festival Lunar New Year Celebration Proclamation on January 29th, 2023 at the Amherst Regional Middle School. I believe it starts at 11 a.m. So that families may celebrate the New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Thank you. And we'll also be sending an email out to see which counselors are available to join us. We're going to move on to presentations and discussions. And for this, I'm going to ask Athena to put up a schedule that you received as we were looking at the earlier discussion. Can you enlarge it slightly? Oops. That's, yeah, okay, that's good. So tonight, as I mentioned earlier, we're really kicking off the lead up to going out to the residents of Amherst to ask them to vote to pay for this, to help pay for the school, along with a very sizable grant from the Mass School Building Authority. Next time we meet in 2 weeks, we'll actually talk about debt authorization. We'll talk about the debt exclusion, including ballot language, the dates, and the impact on taxpayers, which we did not discuss tonight. At that point, this will get referred to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee, we asked them to discuss and make recommendations and come back to us so that on February 27th, we can actually vote the debt exclusion language, the date, and any other items with regard to the actual the election. The Finance Committee then discusses the debt authorization, and we eventually on March 20th will hold a public forum on appropriation for the school project. The Finance Committee has further discussions about the debt authorization, and actually on April 3rd, we will vote the actual debt authorization. That is a 2/3 vote of the council. Then the Mass School Building Authority does actually make their formal and final vote. And our estimated date at this point for the electorate of Amherst to vote is May 2nd, 2023, and at that point, it is a simple majority of 50%. So I want to take this down for the moment. We'll make sure it's in the packet. But I also want to mention we have a lot of things that we also need to think about doing as a council. First of all, we need to think about the fact that state law allows mail-in ballots, but it only requires them for statewide elections. State law allows early voting, but it only requires them for statewide elections. And so one of the things that we as a council will need to determine is, are we going to do a early voting? Are we going to do mail-in ballots? And there are some people who have suggested that we do something to do a much more significant outreach to the UMass Amherst campus. And what would that look like? That's a whole piece of our discussion that we need to have and make some decisions about. Another area that I think we need to think about is, how can we as counselors, in our role of having constituents throughout the town, help in our constituents understand the importance of this project and the need for the project, and answer their many questions. And so I am asking all district counselors to schedule a district meeting sometime in March or February or March, I should say. And I know Kathy and other people from the team are willing to be available. We can also make sure that the presentation that we had tonight is taped, so that you as a counselor will not have to be the expert on all the questions, but there'll be somebody there to help you answer those questions. And we'd like to publicize those district meetings as a full set of district meetings, so that people know when they are, and even if they can't come to their own district meeting, maybe they could come to another district meeting. Another issue that has come up, and in your packet tonight, we just put it in toward late this afternoon, is what role are you allowed to play as an individual counselor, as a resident of Amherst? And specifically, can you advocate for this project? And the answer is yes, but you cannot use town resources to do that. You cannot use your computer. You cannot use your town email or anything else that's considered town resources to advocate for this project. The town as a body cannot advocate for the project. It can provide information. It can do all kinds of things to help it move us forward, but it cannot be the advocate. But as individuals, we can be an advocate for this project. So with that, I thought it would be useful for people to ask other questions, express other issues they want to make sure we address during this time period. This is the first time that a body of the town of Amherst has gone out for a debt exclusion in a long time. And it's clearly the first time that this council has. So, Dorothy.
This list of meetings that you want to have, some of them I think have to be in person. I mean, we already did a meeting with a school presentation and we had a decent little Zoom attendance, but it was, moderate. So if we do a large meeting and I say you do it at the Jones Library, am I using a town resource?
If you're doing a district meeting, that is
a district meeting with a school presentation, using a town or town subsidized building to some extent, is that okay?
That's absolutely okay, because a district meeting is a requirement of all counselors to do with their districts.
Okay.
Okay.
And if I did a district meeting outside in March, which is what I'd really love to do, because people
find a warm enough place.
I know people would come though. They would come.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Good question. Kathy.
Yeah, Dorothy, just to clarify, Lynn made a distinction between providing information and answering questions to, I would say the other thing is knocking on doors to get out the vote, it's they're different. But one thing I would like anyone's advice, and I'm having worked this long on it, I'm willing to devote whatever hours I have. We had at least one public person write the council tonight. So I added a sentence in my quick overview. With declining enrollment, why are we building a school? So I'm trying to think of what fact sheets, simple ones, but because the notion that we're combining two schools and getting down to one is because we have such low enrollment, but trying to think of a handful of short ones. And when I say like one pagers, so that I don't expect people to find the frequently asked question part of that website that Margaret just showed. And if they do, there's probably a question they want answered that they might not find or might not find in the fullness. So I thought of trying to do a few. So the one I know is, what's a net zero energy school? Or, what about the school? Do we have? Because for some people, climate action will be a very attractive part of this building, what we're doing as a model. And it's, when I talk about it, we're talking about the school can be a project for the kids to learn from because of the way we're building it. So I know I'm going to write that one, but any suggestions any of you have, because people are asking you questions, I'm just, why do we need a new school? What's a net zero? What's in it for the community? We are restoring the community fields. And Andy's question about the site tonight, there is a lot of money in that 81 million that has to do with protecting against water, drainage systems, raising the foundation of the school up by putting more dirt and gravel and drainage underneath it. So there's been a lot of work with civil engineers, including the fields, to make the fields more usable. So again, just trying to think through what beyond videos that make a lot of complicated information accessible. Just send me thoughts. I'm on topics, and I will try to say what 2 or 3. And I'm not saying alone. Alicia's here, but I'm going to recruit anyone from the building committee and or the school committee that wants to think of simple, non-technical ways of talking about this. And I appreciate that. I'm too close to it to see what might be needed. So I would really appreciate any input.
Okay, thank you. Anna?
Yeah, I just wanted to be really clear, and I think I may have misheard something. All of the things that you're talking about in terms of us advocating for or against different ballot questions are very much about the use of public resources. And the memo is very clear that on our own personal time and dime, we are allowed to do what we would like to support these or not support these. And so we can go knock on doors. We can send out from our private emails. We can donate if we choose to from our private bank accounts to these causes. I just wanted to make that really clear. And it's not unethical for us. I mean, even the last page, it says serve on a ballot question committee. I mean, right, like that's pretty much the furthest you could go to supporting a measure. So I want to make this really clear that it would not be a misuse nor a violation of campaign finance law for us to be supporting or not supporting a different ballot. Doesn't need to be this one. I'm just speaking generally, this ballot measure, as long as it is on our own personal time and dime. And we have a lot of personal time, since this is not, well, relatively speaking, since this is not a full-time job, supposedly.
Thank you, Anna. And that is a total and complete clarification. Michelle.
Thank you. I have a comment and a question. The comment is, I wanted to share my appreciation for 3 community members, Tony Cunningham, Maria Kopecki, and Rudy Perkins, for securing a recommendation from the CPA for $700,000 for the recreational fields. And I wanted to ask if it would make any sense for us to consider pulling that particular recommendation out to vote it sooner. I don't know the details in terms of when we would vote the whole slate of recommendations. But just looking at the chart and the way that it was presented earlier, if we know that we have that money secured, it may help us as we're starting to go out to folks and try to give them some sense of the numbers.
Michelle, very good question. Actually, we look at CPA recommendations. They're ready for us to look at. I'm trying to see when we would bring them forward in February. In what we've done in the most recent years is we've brought them forward and basically refer them directly to the Finance Committee, who comes back with a recommendation. And then there are certain ones from time to time that have been contingent upon something else happening. For instance, the library. I have every reason to believe we will probably vote that CPA recommendation contingent upon the override, but we will do it well before the override. Okay, yeah. And I appreciate your thanking people for coming forward with their recommendation. They've also 3 people who've been very active in making sure this school is net zero and on target. Jennifer.
Yeah, kind of echoing Michelle. I think that, I look at my district, of course, I think they're, to a person committed to education, whether they have children in the schools or not. But since so many don't, as much as we can talk about the other community benefits in terms of the fields and, other community spaces that the new school will provide, I think that's would only be a good thing in garnering the widest possible support.
Okay. Are there other comments or questions or things that you want to make sure we think about as we move forward? Kathy.
So that just gave me, thank you both for that comment, because there's a lot of community benefits to this that we can put in a separate slant. I just wanted to be Anna said, when will we really know about MSBA? This report with the cost numbers is due to MSBA on March 2nd. And the actual meeting is not till the end of April, but they give us a reading on things earlier. And that's when they will look at what is being proposed. They have already, just so people know, they've already approved the spaces that Donna showed on that very first slide, the 105. That went through when we got approval to go to this phase. So it was already talked through how many classes, rooms, how much special needs space, et cetera. So what they haven't looked at, and they are just sending out the new formula with the changes they made in December. So they will go through Margaret's calculations using their formula and tell her whether she's doing it right or not. So Paul, I don't know exactly when we'll get that read, but it won't be like a surprise. They will say, no, you're well off or something else. So that's one thing on the actual costs, the town share. And the other one that was left, the similar, and thank you, Michelle, for the big call out for the people securing the CPA money. The other thing that may go from a question mark to a yes for sure if the federal government comes out with regs for these tax credits that are supposedly going to be available. If there is a reg that says a town can apply for a tax credit to offset 30% of the cost of the PV system or X percent of the geothermal, we have those numbers. And it's pretty easy for me to calculate, or Sean to calculate what that is if we know it's real. And what we've just been hesitant, with particularly what's going on in Congress, we need that bill to stay on the books all the way through the beginning, to the point we can apply. So it will be real money if those tax credits are real. So I do put those two ifs. And what I don't know is whether we'll know that before May 2nd, how quickly or slowly. So the school committee and all public are getting notice that there's new potential money for conservation and sustainability. They put, and just, it's not a credit because we don't pay taxes. It's literally a direct payment for a share of the costs.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Anna?
Sorry, I'm just looking really quickly and I'm trying to, do we have access to those slides I'm not seeing them in the packet?
They will be put in the packet.
Great.
They were literally being changed up to the last minute, but they will definitely be in the packet.
That would be great. Thank you. And thank you, Kathy, for clarifying with your answer.
Okay. All right. I'm going to now go on to the action items. 8A was pulled off the consent agenda, and I'm looking for a motion other than the one that is on the sheet. And Mandy Jo, please go ahead.
So I'd actually request that we postpone this because Athena has said that she wants to get a different order from Eversource since they like the orders. My motion was going to be that they be allowed, or what I would hope the order is consistent with is that they be allowed to install the one pole 147/14M that's on the same side of the street as all the poles. And that then they have to provide underground service from those poles under the public way to the building. So that those two poles that are closest to the building do not get installed. Instead, we don't have wires going across the public way, they go under the public way, and then that they have to repair the road to the town specifications for it. But Athena has indicated that Eversource doesn't like us to add our own language. They want their own order prepared, consistent with what we want to do.
Okay. And so the earliest that would be back on our agenda is February 6th. Are there any other comments from counselors before we send Eversource back to the drawing board for that new order? Shalini?
Could someone clarify, when they said that the cost would be sent to the client? So if you're thinking about the underground and redoing the road and all of that, who is the client in this case?
The client is that large development on Southeast Street, the new apartment buildings there. That's right on the adjacent to the bank, basically.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Anna?
Yeah, I wanted to add just in support of that, putting them underground. The more as we look at, all right, I'm gonna try to stay off my soapbox, but the more that we look at our climate changing, the more we really need to be pushing for our utilities to be underground. The more that they're above ground, the more they're going to get hit by limbs falling in storms, the more that extreme weather is going to impact them. So I think that this is a cost that goes on to the builders in this case, but as we think about longevity, this is important to really start focusing on doing.
Okay. Are there any other comments on this particular issue? Okay, seeing none, then we're going to go on to the proposed special act on residential property transfer fees. And Mandy Jo Haneke and Anna Devlin Gothier have been the two counselors who have sponsored this. And let me just say that I did share with you earlier an email in response to one person. This is really a two-part process. It's more than two parts, but it's two main parts. One is we need to file a special act that allows us to get to the table so that we can participate in a statewide discussion. Once and if that special act results in some action on Beacon Hill, if we see that's the way it's going, then we will be developing our own bylaw, which will describe its implementation in Amherst. With that, I'm going to turn it over. So our vote tonight is to approve the proposed special act set forth below, an act establishing a real estate transfer fee upon the transfer of property to the city known as the town of Amherst, and to petition the general court for special legislation provided, however, that the general court may make clerical and editorial changes of form only to the bill unless the town council approves amendments to the bill before enactment by the general court. I'm going to seek a second and then the introduction and discussion.
Second, Devlin Gothier.
Great. Mandy Jo and Anna?
Mandy, do you want to start off or do you want me to? Okay. So I think one of the things that Mandy and I talked about when we first introduced this was that it's a really good way to look at the beauty of our process, right? And we really saw that through going through meetings with the Affordable Housing Trust, through the Finance Committee, through speaking with residents as we went. And where we've ended up with the changes that we're hoping to move forward and send to the legislature today is something that's stronger than what we originally submitted. So I want to thank the committees who took time and care with this, especially the Housing Trust, who dedicated a decent part of a meeting to this earlier in December. As a reminder, the two parts to this initiative, I guess is what I'll call it. Part one is, as Lynn said, this special act. The special act is essentially saying that the town of Amherst is allowed to put a 2% transfer fee on property transfers, and that they will regulate that by bylaw. The bylaw is going to be a whole other, we are going to test the beauty of that process. I know when we get to the point, hopefully we get to the point of writing the bylaw. The bylaw is when we will decide all of the really specific elements about this, right? So right now we are saying, please let us approve the special act to get us to the point where we can write the bylaw. So that's the two-parter here. I know a lot of folks have had specific questions about exemptions, about numbers, and about percentages going to different places. Those specifics would all be determined by bylaw. That was the way that we wrote this, to make sure that we're allowing our town to make the decisions that are right for our town, not saying that we are going to write something in this home rule, which is really locked in by the state and really can't change them once they're there. We're not saying that we want to be totally locked in. We want to be able to study this over time. We want to be able to make sure that we're adjusting for the market and things that may shift. So I want to just make that distinction very clear about what we are voting on today versus what we still have to create. And what we had included was a sample bylaw, just to give you an idea of what these might look like. We are not, that is to be written, right? That was, I know that may have caused some confusion. So that's sort of the intro. And I hope that you will support us in sending this to the legislature today and voting this. Couple major shifts that we made. We had added the Affordable Housing Trust to be one of the groups that the remaining funds are divided between. As a reminder, it's not necessarily an even split. That split is determined by the bylaw, but it picks from the general, it divides between the general fund, the Affordable Housing Trust, and the Capital Stabilization Fund after the first initial amount goes to the trust itself. Mandy, anything to add?
I just want to thank Anna for spearheading this and talking to me and letting me join her in this. This was really her idea. And so I think she deserves the credit for getting us this far. I mean,
holding up a mirror here, because what I showed Mandy was a real big messy document. And I said, I think I'm trying to figure this out. And Mandy went through and helped me actually craft that language. So right back, this has been a whole labor and I've learned a lot.
Okay.
Lynn.
So now we're going to move to questions from the council. Kathy.
Thank you. This was reviewed in the Finance Committee and we moved it forward positively. I just have one question, actually not so much on the wording, but on the way you just worded it, Anna. If whatever revenues come in from this, we've kept the legislation general to leave us a lot of flexibility. But we've talked about a first 250 goes here, and then the rest can go to one of three places is the way I read, and or. But but that's left to either a bylaw specification or council votes. Am I correct? I mean, so we haven't said the rest gets divided 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Correct. We've left it open that this much of it goes here, and then we look at the remainder, and that would be in the wording of the bylaw. Yes or no?
Oh, Mandy, sorry, go ahead.
Mandy, Joe.
Yes, so it would be determined by the bylaw. So that means either the bylaw would specifically set forth the distribution in those percentages, or I know there was some conversation at Finance Committee that it would be rather that some Finance Committee members might prefer it being distributed as part of or indicated as part of the comprehensive operating and comprehensive yearly budget. And so a bylaw could actually say either this percent to here, this percent to here, and this percent to here, or it could say something like to these three specifically indicated in every operating budget or something like that, or set forth in that. I'm not sure what the language would look like, but the bylaw would have to say either the percentage or where you're going to find how it's distributed.
That is, so I think you've answered that. This is not specific now, but it can and will be made specific later. So to the extent those of us who are then reviewing the bylaw are saying, actually, I would want more of it to the general fund, or more of it to the state, or more to the housing trust. It's not written in stone right now.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Andy, I apologize for not calling on you for the Finance Committee report. Let's do that. And then you also have your hand up.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. The Finance Committee report was provided in writing, and so I don't really feel that there's a need to go through in detail what's already been presented in writing, but certainly available for any questions about what was discussed in Finance Committee and how we came out to where we did. Regarding the item that Kathy was raising and that there's been some discussion on already, I think that what we recognized is that a lot of communities are looking at this from the eastern part of the state is dealing with the affordable housing question only. Some of those communities may not have the high percentage of affordable housing already. We are well above the minimum required by state statute and have made tremendous progress and made tremendous investments. And I think we still remain committed to making investments. But what we also know is that we are unique for all of the reasons that we discussed in our budget guidelines for the town manager, and that recognizing that there are a lot of goals that councils have, this and past councils and future councils, and that revenue is always the barrier, and that we wanted to make sure that this would also be considered a revenue source for other needs that might be identified in future budget processes if we're successful in getting the bylaw and make the decision, getting the statute, and then getting the permission to go forward with the bylaw. And the question then came up of how best to do that. And I think that our conclusion in the Finance Committee, which has been alluded to, is that the best result is to leave it to future councils to make that decision, because there may be a very high need for an affordable housing project in a particular year, and that should be considered. There may be other needs, and that's not something that can be prejudged. So when it came down to the language as determined by bylaw, that was with the hope that we would have the decision made at the bylaw adoption stage, that it'd be done on an annual basis. But that's a decision, for as many other things are, for the future. And the last thing I just wanted to say is we as counselors have received some emails early in the process when this was first proposed, raising a series of questions which we discussed. But we decided that all of those kinds of issues, like the effect it has on particular somebody who's owned property for a long period of time, it is their sole asset that they're selling at the time that they're moving out of their home that they've lived in for many years, and how important that asset is to them, are issues that really can be considered at the bylaw stage and should be considered in the bylaw stage. They should not be dealt with in the special legislation, because we felt the special legislation it was going to allow, if it's adopted as we've requested, will allow the council to make those decisions in the bylaw adoption stage. So I think that summarizes the discussion, unless other members of the committee have other things they want to add.
That's fine. Thank you, Andy. Michelle?
Andy, I appreciate, I had to leave that finance committee meeting early, so I appreciate that last piece of clarification. One of the questions I had was about public input. So it sounds like the finance committee discussed that that would be better suited to happen beyond this stage of things. The other thing I wanted to say is that if anyone on the council was following Carol Lewis's email and questions, I did reach out to her. And as the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, she was very comfortable with the way that the motion has been written. So I just wanted to share that with other colleagues. And then the final thing I have here is, does the special act as it's currently written preclude the remaining money beyond the 250,000 to be part of just a line item on the budget? Like, I guess I'm trying to figure out, we talked about this a little bit in finance committee. It seems like if it's a bylaw, then it's sort of under the purview of the town council. Whereas if it's just part of like financial guidelines, and it would be the town manager's purview to kind of figure out where the money would be best utilized in a given year. And also, do we actually review bylaws on an annual basis? So I'm just trying to understand sort of that. I love the way that this is structured, but just trying to understand, looking at a bylaw versus, having it be something that is part of the financial guideline process, so that it is every year looked at or based on particular circumstances in a year. That's it.
Anna, go ahead, although Michelle's questions are kind of in line with my own comments.
I'm gonna take my best shot at it. So, and Michelle, let me know if I miss anything. In terms of the line, let me take the easy one first. I think that we could write into the bylaw something about reviewing it regularly. If that's something that the council wanted. I'm not positive, but I don't see why we couldn't say this bylaw shall be, or these fees shall be reviewed annually. Not fees, these percentages shall be reviewed annually. I don't see why that's not doable. I think that's reasonable to do. I think I'm a little confused on how it would not, in terms of what, like financial guidelines versus bylaw. I'm having trouble equating those. And so I think that for me, the bylaw is because it has to be a bylaw, has to be on the books. But that if we built into the bylaw something about being able to review those splits, or however we decide to distribute, that would be a bylaw equation, which I think gets at what you were saying in terms of the regular check-ins on where it's going.
So
yeah,
let me walk this back a little bit, okay? Because the question before us tonight is, are we willing to file this special legislation? And as I mentioned earlier, part of the reason we are bringing this forward now is to make sure that we're at a table with other cities and towns that are discussing this. And it could end up in any number of places. It could end up on the floor, never to be resuscitated again. It could end up in individual special acts for various towns, or it could end up in a statewide law that allows towns within a certain set of state laws to do what to allow them to do this. And it could get very prescriptive. some towns, for example, have wanted this all to go to affordable housing. Okay. And so we have to remember that once you join into a state process, this is where if you don't like to watch sausage being made, don't watch legislation, because it gets very convoluted, and it can but the goal for us is to be at the table so that we can try to maintain as much flexibility as is presently written in our special act. Once the state acts, then we are at a situation with a bylaw, but that bylaw has to be written subject to being consistent with the state law. And so we hope the flexibility is in the state law, because if it's not, then frankly, some people in Amherst are not going to be happy. So, but once our bylaw is written, if we then go to a schedule, we often have fee schedules that are separate so they can be changed more easily rather than delve into bylaws. And we also often have regulations that are separate so they can be changed without going into the bylaw. Financial guidelines are not bylaws. If you want something to be law, it has to be in a bylaw. Okay, so I just wanted to walk us back to the fact that we're just at the beginning, and our hope is that we make it through this state legislative discussion with flexibility in the outcome, so that when we bring it home, we can do something flexible like we're talking about now. Mandy, Joe, or Andy, or Anna?
I mean, I can try. So the bylaw, I tried to do this before, but I'm not very articulate with this. If the council wants complete control over the remainder, then the council would set forth the percentages in a bylaw. And then if they wanted to ever change those percentages, they'd have to modify the bylaw and revise the bylaw. If this gets through and passes and all of that, right? This is all hypothetical, assuming the state legislature grants our request for a special act with the language we've used. If the council wants to give that discretion for the split to the town manager, it could write a bylaw that sort of says, with line items to be for these three things, you know, allocating the funds received from this fee in the budget, separate line items, something like that. And then the manager would have the say, and the council could reduce one of those lines, but couldn't increase one of those lines. So I think it would depend on whether the council wants complete control or wants to cede that control to the manager. And if it does that, then it could use the financial guidelines to attempt to exert some control outside of a bylaw.
Thank you. Andy?
Yes, so I guess what I'm going to do is kind of combine Lynn's and Mandy's comments and just add a little bit to them, because I agree with all that has been said so far. We have to be very careful to remember that the budget process is set by state law and our charter, and we can't change the budget process. And so when it comes, if we do it on an annual basis, we have to recognize that an allocation to a specific program that we particularly, or a future council, I shouldn't even say we, because it's going to be a future council. It's not going to be this exact group that's before that we are today. That they'll make it, they may have a preference, but that there can't go farther in saying a general fund allocation use, because to a specific purpose, they can only go as far as what the guidelines are and give that preference to the town manager, and the town manager will make the decision as to whether to put it into the budget, and then the council will decide and act on it with the limitations that Mandy has stated. And, we just have to recognize that our charter and state law tie together, and they are what they are. The only alternative is to put the exact percentages in the bylaw, but saying you want something to go into the general fund has all the same limitations, and it is hard, and it's not going to be a feasible process given the complexity of bylaw adoption and bylaw amendment process for councils to do that on an annual basis, to amend the bylaws in order to get a specific. And I think that the reaction from the committee is that it really was something that needed to be saved for a future date, for when we get to the bylaw stage. And ultimately, what we were most focused on in the end was exactly what Anna and Mandy have talked about already, is that we felt that this was a valuable idea. It was one worth moving forward with, and that what's before you today was the best way to go about doing it. But we need to get it in, because if we are going to be considered by the legislature this year, we are very soon running across the deadline to effectively get special legislation filed. And that it was that, so the number one recommendation was, let's do it and get it for the legislature. It's the start of a new session. It's the right time to do it. And that so that's the core part of the recommendation from the Finance Committee.
Are there any other comments, Shalini?
Yeah, I understand this might be something more for later, but I actually wanted to just bring it forward to see if this is something we should include at this stage, which is the regressive effect that this tax can have. For example, there's a case study of a first-time home, so it has an effect on first-time home buyers, which is what we want to encourage in our town. And there's a case study of first-time home buyers with $41,000 saved for upfront costs, and a 2% point increase, like a transfer tax, could cause a 16% decrease in the homes they can afford. So I know that this is something we're going to look at later on, but even just to bring it forward, I think we can deal with it by saying that houses above 400,000 only will be, or like we don't charge transfer fee for houses below a certain. So it's a very simple fix, but I wonder if that's something we should do now itself.
Andy Jo?
So Anna and I have always said we want the special act to be as flexible as possible. So those exemptions that you talked about, Shalini, are exactly what we would be looking to exempt in a proposed bylaw. If you look at our sample bylaw, you'll see any owner occupancy, any owner occupied home, whoever's side is owner occupied is exempt as long as the home is under 200% median home value, which is a large number in Amherst. It's $720,000 is 200% median home value. And so, we don't and so that would take care of all of that. What we don't want to do is put it in the special act specifically, because it's really hard to change that. And so, if that 200% needs to be increased to 300% or potentially decreased to 150 or something for some reason we find out about, for whatever reason, and I can't think of them now, but that's what we'd be discussing in the bylaw development. If it's in the special act, we can't change it. And so that's why we're trying to push as much to the bylaw as possible. But yes, in proposing this, we have fully intended to have it not affect particularly any homes that any transfers of property, residential property that would be occupied by those who own the property and that are under, at least at this time, our intent is 200 AMI, that $720,000 number. And so I believe your concern would be addressed by those exemptions.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, then we're going to move to a vote. The motion's been made and seconded. We're going to start with Anna Devlin Gothier.
Yes.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. Mandy Jo Hannicky.
Aye.
Anika Lopes.
Aye.
Michelle Miller.
Aye.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Andy Steinberg.
Yes.
Jennifer Taub.
Yes.
Alicia Walker. Alicia. Shalini Balmilne.
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
Okay. Alicia, are you back with us?
Yes.
And your vote was yes.
Yes.
Thank you. That's unanimous. We're going to take a break at this point, since we've been going at it for essentially 2 hours. And when we come back, we are going to take up action item E. Okay. We'll take a 10-minute break. Actually, we're going to come back at 7:50.
Lynn, can I just really briefly say thank you to everyone for supporting Mandy and I and asking really great questions throughout this process. This has been an absolute journey, and so I appreciate you all. Thank you. It feels
Great.
great to send it off with a unanimous vote. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks to the both of you for your hard work. So make sure you turn off your sound, make sure you turn off your video, and when you return at 7:50, turn your video back on. As you return, please turn your video back on. Okay, I'm waiting for one more person. Actually, Alicia, are you back?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Great. We're going to continue. I'm actually going to be turning the meeting over to Anna Devlin Gothier. Before I do that, please note that Anika Lopes has had to leave the meeting. I'm recusing myself from this. I'll be put in the audience and I'll be back right after. I've filed a disclosure statement with the town clerk as required. This is an organization I used to head and the MS Donahue Institute, and I continue to do some consulting with them, though not in any way related to this matter. So with that, Anna, you're going to take over, and Athena, please put me in the audience.
All right, thank you, Lynn. So while Lynn is moving, just to be clear, this would have been on consent, except for the fact that Lynn wanted to be able to vote on consent, and so she recused herself from this. So I'm going to make the motion and then see if there's a second, and we'll open it up if there's any discussion. Otherwise, we will go ahead and vote on this matter. Athena, I don't know if you want to put it up on the board or not. If people want to listen to me read it, I will read it with passion. In accordance with MGL Chapter 40, Section 4A, which allows for joint operation of public activities among governmental units, which requires that such intergovernmental agreements be approved by the town council and negotiated and signed by the town manager, the town council hereby authorizes the town manager to enter into an agreement with the University of Massachusetts Donahue Institute for consulting services for the town related to the evaluation of the Community Responders for Equity, Safety, and Service CRESS department.
Second, Haneke.
Thank you. Is there any discussion before we move to the vote? Kathy?
I totally support doing this. So the question I have is the content of what they're going to do, Paul. You've been in a, we had a little bit of a discussion on this when we were doing the financial guidelines on, but also it's not just evaluation, but it's kind of in the broader context of the town, looking at work hours, caseloads, what's happened to calls. So my question is, I am an evaluator, or I was in a previous life. I want to make sure Donahue hears what we want to know as they design their evaluation, and that we, to the extent we can, give them before and after data, on calls and the mix of calls before and after. And then my last is, we're talking about 6 months. I think they went live, to the extent we say live, on the street this month. And so we'll have, I think, good data after 6 months. But if you included since last August, we won't have very much other than startup time. You know, it can be qualitative at that point. So just, is 6 months going to be enough to talk about this in terms of the timing of what they're going to be looking at? So those are the more questions. It's more questions about the content rather than the doing. Yeah.
Right. And so I want to just clarify, Kathy, thank you. Those are really great, important questions. This is simply authorizing Paul to enter into an agreement that will then allow us to engage with discussing what would be, or allow Paul to engage in what would be included in that evaluation. This is simply authorizing him to enter into that agreement. I want us to be very careful in this discussion that we are not debating or discussing what would be in the evaluation, because that's not what we are doing here, right? We are authorizing the town manager to enter in.
And I totally agree with that. And it's mainly, you know, the two questions about the time, but normally when we authorize this may be the last time we see it. So I was in part just laying on the table.
Yeah, which I think is
the Paul side. So it was not at all. I don't want to put details on that, in more details into this. This wording is fine with me.
Yep. Thank you. Paul, would you like to respond to that, or should I go to Pam?
And Sean may want to weigh in on this too. This is totally in response to our grant requirement with the State Department of Public Health. So it's basically according to their specifications, according to their grant. This isn't an overall program evaluation necessarily. It will get a piece of that, but it won't be that what you're talking about is a much broader thing.
And
Okay, that's very helpful.
And it may go beyond June 30th. So I do want to be clear that we are still negotiating terms. So we're not 100% set on any of the terms. And we may want to go longer because we don't want the evaluation to drive what CRESS is doing. We want the evaluation to sort of, go hand in hand with CRESS as it's naturally kind of getting ramped up. So we don't want an artificial deadline to, result in a product that's not going to be helpful to us. So we may want some flexibility with that deadline, and that's something we're thinking about. But as Paul said, the evaluation itself is a requirement of the DPH grant that we have.
That's very helpful. Both answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Kathy. Pam?
Yeah, building on Kathy's thing, is this a, do you have a fixed price in mind so that if it goes longer, we somehow owe more money to the Donahue Institute?
Sean?
Yeah, that's sort of what we're still hashing out is how the timing will work if things don't move as fast as we expect, or if they move faster, how the payment structure will work. We're trying to model it after a state contract for professional services, PRF 76, which has a number of firms on it, but we chose Donahue Institute because they're local and they understand state government really well. So the rates are based on an established state contract. But in terms of how we pay them, whether it's hourly or fixed price, that's something we're still working on.
Thank you.
So, but do you have a cap in mind of?
Yeah, so we have an upper number, but again, we don't want to, we're being cautious around doing a fixed price, not knowing exactly how fast CRESS is going to ramp up and be at that place where we can maximize the value of the contract. So,
thank you. Pam, is that?
Yep.
All right, Shalini.
I was curious if there's any reason why we're going with Donahue over, let's say, LEAP. Was it LEAP, which already deals with and has an expertise in these kind of programs?
Sean or Paul, do you have a take on that?
Nothing. There's no strong. Well, I think we think Donahue Institute has a particular skill set in analyzing data. LEAP at one point we were working with and at one for reasons beyond this, they had to go a different direction. So we haven't re-engaged them to see if they'd be interested in coming back. But we have met with representatives from Donahue Institute and gone through in depth sort of what we're looking for. A lot of what Kathy was talking about in terms of the quantitative type information that we're hoping to gather. And it seems like they have a really good understanding. So at this point, we're moving forward, or we're proposing to move forward with Donahue Institute. But again, nothing's set in stone at this point.
So this is program evaluation. And so that's a particular strength for Donahue Institute. And that's and it's also allows us to do this as an intergovernmental agreement as well. And the fact that they are local as well.
Thank you. Alicia?
Thank you, Anna. So I honestly have the same question as Shalini. And just to further expand on that, were any other institutes vetted for this? And I had the same question about LEAP, just because this is a very specific program that we're looking at data in regards to. And we know that there aren't many, if any, programs that exist to like that are exactly like CRESS. And since LEAP has worked with this specific set of data and skill sets, why their agency wouldn't at least be considered or vetted, or why wouldn't we have been in conversation with them when choosing? And also, again, just if any other institutions have been thought of or vetted for this before making that ultimate decision.
So again, we could certainly reach back out to them. They stepped away at a earlier point in the implementation of CRESS, voluntarily stepped away. It wasn't a choice from the town. So something we could reach back out to. There is a little bit of a time sensitivity here because of the grant ending on June 30th. We hope that the grant will be rolled over, where the timing doesn't matter as much, but as of right now, it hasn't been. So that's still a consideration. Again, this is up for discussion. LEAP played a role in sort of the creation of the CRESS program. You may want somebody who wasn't involved in the creation of the program to support the evaluation of the program. And a lot of what the work will be at this early stage is not even necessarily the evaluation. It will be working with the CRESS department to build the systems that will gather all the data that we can evaluate in the future. We're making those decisions now in terms of what types of software we'll have. And as we get that software and we build it out, we're looking for that expertise as to what types of data to gather.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Sorry, is it okay if I just follow up?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you had any other questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sean. And this is not to invalidate anything from the Donahue Institute, but I do think that LEAP would be just as qualified to do a job, and they weren't as involved in the implementation stage because they didn't attend any of the implementation meetings. They only gave feedback to the CSWG in terms of recommendations, and I don't even think they're aware as to how we have ultimately decided to set up our own program. And I know they stepped away but I think that was because our contract with them had ended. I don't think we contracted them to continue the implementation process. We just simply looked at them for the recommendations and the vetting through the CSWG, and that contract ended when the CSWG ended. And I think we had them come and speak with the implementation team one time. And so again, I just still think that there could have been more investigation gone into where or who would be doing this evaluation, and somebody who is more specific to this kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, I think our choice would be to use UMass Donahue Institute for this particular thing. I appreciate the work that LEAP does. I think they do really good work, and we would re-engage them in another phase in a heartbeat. But this is, when you do program evaluation, that seems to be a particular strength of the UMass Donahue Institute, as opposed to program development, which is what I think LEAP was really good at. So the recommendation is to get approval from the council to go with the UMass Donahue Institute.
So there is a motion and a second that has been made. If there are no further questions from the council about this, I'd like to move to a vote. That's all right. Kathy?
I just want to support what Paul just said about different functions. When you look at organizational sites, so I just quickly clicked on LEAP. If an organization wants to start functioning as an evaluator, they will usually say, these are the services we provide, and it's very distinct. So in years past, when we set up really innovative programs, when I was working with healthcare institutions, there was one group that helped us set it up and found us models that we could replicate. There was another group who came and looked at whether what we set up was working. So I think that distinction is what we're talking about here, and it's a real one for being able to come in and take a look, because they will have the LEAP report. So I think that skill set is an important skill set. So I just want to underscore that whether Donahue is the only one, they are very local and well known. being able to do that is different than helping someone set it up for the starters.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Alicia, and then I'd really love to move to a vote after this. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Anna. I just want to plug that I understand what Kathy's saying, but I also think that there is an underestimated value to having somebody who is specific to this kind of work, because just evaluating how any program is running is very difficult when we're creating a program that's new and that has never been functioning before. And so, like, how do you evaluate its efficiency? And I would be much more comfortable working with somebody who is expertise in this specific subject.
I'm gonna use my privilege as a, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah. I just want to just add that when we're talking about evaluation, Donahue's not going to come in and say this program is working well or not working well. Again, they're mostly working side by side with Crest to help build the systems. One of the things that we're talking about them doing is providing a dashboard, for example, that can report out information on how Crest is doing, like the types of things that Crest is doing. But we're not expecting a report that says this was a good decision, bad decision, it's working great, it's not working well. That's not the type of evaluation services we're looking for right now. We're looking for that help building the systems that we'll be able to evaluate in the future and hopefully be able to do it ourselves. That's really what we're looking for, is to build it so we can do it ourselves year after year. So I just want to, just clarify that we're not getting an evaluation that's going to say, give us a definitive answer.
Thank you, Sean. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move to the vote, and I believe I voted first last. So we're going to skip Griesmer and go to Haneke.
Aye.
Anika Lopes has left us this evening. Miller?
Abstain.
Dorothy Pam. I know why she does that every time now. Dorothy Pam?
Yes.
Pam Rooney?
Yes.
Kathy Shane?
Yes.
Andy Steinberg?
Aye.
Jennifer Taub?
Yes.
Alicia Walker?
No.
Shalini Ball-Milne?
Yes.
Angeles?
Yes.
And Anna Devlin Gauthier is an aye, and Griesmer is, I believe, would be marked as absent or abstain. Abstain. So I did not count as I was calling, Athena, so I apologize for that. Do you have the count?
I have 9 in favor, 1 against, 1 abstention, and 2 absent.
That sounds right to me. Thank you, everybody. We will bring Lynn back into the room, I believe, at this point. And in this thrilling pause, everyone can do a quick, nice deep breath. All right, thank you. Lynn, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Thank you.
Oh, and thank you to Sean. Sorry, I think, Sean, that might be it for you. So you might be able to go home now. Thank you, Sean.
I've never been in the audience during one of our meetings, and I didn't realize that if you turn your camera off, the public doesn't know you're here.
Yep.
And so it's a great reason to keep our cameras on.
It's new, Lynn. It used
Thank
to be
you.
that
It used to be that you saw the image, and
Yeah.
now with the changes.
with the
to
black
Zoom-
with the name. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Been that way for a year. Just sorry. It was that way before we were on council.
Interesting. Okay. I'm going to go on with the agenda. We're going to appointments. We did the town manager appointment by consent. Last time we met, we talked about the non-voting liaison appointments and which committees we thought would be ones that we would like to see liaisons in. GOL was going to meet, but wasn't able to because of posting of the meeting. So rather than delay this, I'm going to suggest that I list for you again the committees that we presently have liaisons, and they're on the board. And there was one other committee that was recommended the last time, and that was the Recreation Committee. And so I'm going to ask whether there are any other committees at this point, reminding people that, if we put a committee up here, then we need to get somebody to volunteer. So I'm looking for any comments on the list, including Recreation Committee. Jennifer.
Were you also looking for us to indicate if we couldn't continue? I mean,
we're going to get there in just a moment.
Get there. Okay, so I'll hold.
I just want comments on the list of committees. And then we'll go to people who are presently or would like to be. Pat?
I would like to be part of the recreation.
Okay, so in other words,
but I'm trying to understand whether it's the Recreation Commission or is there a separate recreation committee?
Paul?
It's one and the same.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, just for correction purposes, the 22 liaison was me. She just corrected it for transportation advisory.
The 22 liaison is you for which one?
Transportation, and that was just changed.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I don't see any more hands, so we're going to work with this list. Jennifer, you're presently Affordable Housing Trust. Would you like to continue?
I really can't. I always seem to have meeting conflicts on Thursday nights because I go to a lot of the TSO meetings.
Okay.
So I just don't feel responsible. It's the Affordable Housing Trust is very important, and I could be a alternate, but I feel very badly that I haven't been able to attend a lot of their meetings because I've had to be somewhere else.
Are there other counselors who are interested in being a liaison to Affordable Housing Trust? Joe?
So I'm not interested in being liaison. I just wanted to remind counselors that a liaison doesn't require attendance at any meetings of the committee that you're a liaison for per our rules. Our rules just, it might encourage them, but you're not required to attend those meetings. You're basically in contact regularly with the chair and get minutes and all sent to you and stuff and talk to them about what needs done, but there's no requirement to attend the meetings in case it's not remembered that of our part of our rules.
Thank you. Jennifer, did you have any further comment?
Yeah, I actually didn't realize that. I mean, I thought I really had to be at all the meetings. They do only meet once a month, and that's the problem. If I have to be at a TSO meeting, and it's always been a council event, like last Thursday when we were going to MMA, if you miss that one meeting, you've missed the whole month. So I will continue to be the liaison unless somebody else would like to. I would certainly want the Affordable Housing Trust to have a liaison.
Okay. Board of Health, Michelle? I'm sorry, Angela, Patty Angeles, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. If I would be willing to work as an alternate with Jennifer on the Housing Trust.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay. Board of Health, Michelle?
I'm fine, unless somebody else is interested in doing this. I'm okay with it.
Anybody else? Moving on, Community Preservation Act, Kathy, you're basically done for the year.
So I worked hard to get this liaison assigned to me, and I'm totally willing to give it up just on sheer workload. So just so people know what that means is they really start meeting at the end of the summer, early September. And then it's a telescoped, there's a maybe once a month, but then there's a telescope time period when the reports come in, the project proposals come in, and they vet the proposals. You get to read all the proposals when they come in if you want to. You get linked to them, and then you watch them sift through what to do when a lot more money is proposed than they have. So I think it's a really good committee and an important one, but I don't need to be the liaison. I've served for 3 years as liaison.
Pam Rooney?
I would be willing to step in there. I used to be the chair of it a long time ago.
Okay. Thank you. Community Safety and Social Justice Committee. We've got 2 at this point. do we feel the need to continue with 2? Pat?
I would like to remove myself. I don't think we need to.
Okay, Dorothy, Pam, are you willing to continue?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Pat, you're on the Disability Access Advisory Committee. Are you willing to continue?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anna, Energy and Climate Action Committee.
Yeah, I believe this committee really needs to continue having a liaison who's able to carry forward the things we saw it in goal setting a lot. There were a significant number of climate action goals. And at this point, I do not think I have the capacity to be the liaison that committee deserves. So if there's someone else who's interested in doing that, that would be wonderful. They have a great chair who's very able to work with folks, especially if you can't make the meetings. So highly recommend this committee. But I do not have the capacity to carry on at this point.
Is there a volunteer for ECAC? Pat, you have your hand up, but I have the
Oh,
feeling.
no, it's an accident.
Okay. Any volunteers? I'm not seeing any. Anna, can you, Alicia?
I have a question. Do we know how frequently they meet?
Yes, they meet twice per month, typically, like first and third Wednesdays, I believe, from 4:30 to 6:30.
I would be willing to be the liaison for that.
Okay, Alicia, thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. I can be in touch with the chair.
Planning Board, Pam Rooney.
I'll stay. Thank you.
Okay. Recreation Committee, Pat, you've already staked your claim on that one. And Andy Steinberg on transportation.
We had said that it should be somebody who's on the TSO committee because of the overlap, and I am on TSO again. So I would be willing to do it unless somebody else is really interested.
Are there any other volunteers? Seeing none, then I'm going to make a motion, look for a second. I'm going to move that the each of the committees as listed will have a liaison as listed for the remainder of our term.
I'll second Haneke.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Then we'll go ahead and vote. I think we're up to starting with Haneke.
Aye.
Anika Lopes is absent. Michelle Miller.
Aye.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
Jennifer Taub.
Yes.
Alicia Walker.
Yes.
Shalini Palmin.
Yes.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
Aye.
Sorry. Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. It's unanimous with 12 counselors voting and 1 absent. We have and now we have actually any committee reports from CRC, Mandy Jo.
We're still plugging along with rental registration. We've added and the referral regarding public nuisance. We haven't set a time frame for the hearing for the referral that happened last meeting. I'm looking at the first March meeting for that, and we'll have elections for chair this coming Thursday, chair and vice chair.
I will be there to open your meeting and run your election. Elementary School Building Committee, Kathy, I think we've kind of done your thing. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. The only thing I want to say is if people want to look at the meetings this month, we had the painful task of cutting costs. And it was a pretty productive in that quick slide that went past you. We lowered it from the cost estimates. We lowered it by over $5 million in a way that doesn't hurt the durability, doesn't hurt any of the function, doesn't hurt the quality. And it was going to an all brick exterior. It was certain kinds of choices that turned out to really matter because of the way the unit prices had gone up. So it was a change in some materials. So that the committee had some, we had difficult choices, but more difficult was designers who had designed something they love coming back to us and taking some of the beloved things. But what the pictures you saw tonight are the changes. So we are seeing already that it doesn't visibly look different than what we were looking at before. So
Terrific. Andy, Finance Committee?
So the Finance Committee is meeting tomorrow at 3:30, and it's in part just an organizational meeting where we're going to scope out what we need to do for the next year and kind of do some scheduling on it, because we are getting into budget season before we know it. The other things that we're going to be talking about are we get budget reports quarterly as to how revenue has come in against what was in the budget, and how expenses have been going compared to what was in the budget. And of course, the budget we're talking about is for FY23, and we're going to be receiving both first and second quarter reports. And I will make sure that they get provided in the packet for the next council meeting. So anybody who's interested, but not so interested that they want to hear, be there to ask questions, you will get copies of it. And the other thing that we're going to do is at least start talking about the referral that was recently made to the committee about the surplus property disposition policy.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, GOL?
Not much to report. There's a proposed meeting date of February 1st. I'm not sure if that's been confirmed. I haven't heard one way or another. So I think that's the date that the next meeting is going to happen.
Athena, have we confirmed that?
Yes, we have.
Okay, February 1st at 9 o'clock. Okay. Paul, is there anything about the Jones Building Committee we should know? You're muted.
That's frowning. Meeting pretty regularly, talking about nothing in particular.
Okay. TSO, Anika's not here. Who's vice chair?
That was me, and I was trying to think, I know that she had talked about trying to have a meeting on Thursday, but I don't believe, it's just not posted yet. So I believe Athena has the update there, and I apologize.
Is Athena, go ahead.
Yes, we did agree to have a meeting. Excuse me. We did agree to have a meeting on Thursday to elect the chair and vice chair, just to look at the upcoming agenda topics for TSO that will be on the upcoming agendas, but not to get into anything too deeply. And then I think approve minutes, and that was it.
Okay. All right. Any liaison reports? Kathy, you had your hand up.
Well, Lynn, one of the ones you're going to need to be asking about is JCPC, and I can't, as the chair until we meet, I can't report yet because we haven't found a date for the first meeting. It's a conflict with the TSO time, so Sean is, but that will start meeting at the beginning-ish of February, and then be an intense. We'll be meeting every week, and we'll be able to. Sean, I think, with Anna's permission, turned off his thing, but we should by next meeting be able to tell you that schedule. And you can also know, Sean will already have figured out when are we going to be hearing from which of the departments, and to the extent any of that is of interest to people. So we will have a schedule. We just don't have a time to meet yet, so we don't have a schedule.
So let me add to that. Sean indicated to me today that it looks as if that group will meet on Wednesdays from 1 to 3. And let me just check something. I want to get that right because evidently this has been a very difficult group to schedule. Hold on.
The
I
short
see.
answer is yes, it's
Then
on
it's
my
Thursday.
calendar. It's on my calendar for, yeah, on the 9th, it's on Thursday.
Is that a Wednesday?
Thursday.
Thursday from 1 to 3. And Anna has indicated to me that she is not able to continue to serve on that committee. And so I've sent you all an email asking if there are people who would like to serve on that committee. That has to be done as agenda item. It has to be posted on our agenda. It was not posted for this week. So I'll be collecting names and we will have that on the February 6th agenda. Pat, you have your hand up. You're muted.
I was going to give a liaison report. I don't know if we're quite there. I
Oh,
thought.
okay. Is there any other question about JCPC? Okay. Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, as liaison for the Disability Access Advisory Committee, I wanted to make the council aware that the committee is exploring movement to becoming a commission, which is supported by Mass General Law C40 S Section 8J. It would allow a full, it would really support full integration of people with disabilities throughout Amherst. It would reduce, advise and assist municipal officials and employees in ensuring compliance with state and federal laws, coordinate and carry out programs to meet problems, and review and make recommendations about policies and procedures, and provide information and guidance and technical assistance across the town to individuals and groups. And what is part of what they're hoping to do, the reason for becoming a commission is that they would be able to have income come in that supported this work. And they're thinking about allocating funds that are received from fines, parking tickets for handicap parking violations, and using that money to fund their work. It's in the planning stages, and I think it's a really exciting possibility. So more later.
Okay. Any other liaison reports? Dorothy? Dorothy, you're muted.
This is a question for Pat. It's hard to imagine there would be that much funding from
I know.
violation of handicap parking permits. Do you have any idea how much that might be?
No, I don't. And that's something they have to explore, but they would also be able to accept money and gifts from other areas. So either from the town or from individuals, I believe. And I might not be correct on that, but yeah.
Thank you.
Paul, did you want to say something?
Okay. Any other liaison reports or questions? Okay. We have already approved the minutes. Paul does a town manager's written report once a month. So this is one of the times it's not. Paul, are there any highlights you'd like to point out for us, however? You need to unmute.
He's frozen.
Well, he's not. He can't find the unmute button.
I love charades.
Paul, is there anything you would like to say at this time? No. Okay. He said, I'm frozen. Okay.
I see. I told you.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's one way to cut it short. Town council comments. Let me just mention a couple things. I did make appointments on Thursday. I also did the very last minute, and I apologize for this, did submit a written president's report I'm not asking you to read it at this point, but if you have questions after you do get a chance to read it, please feel free to give me a call or email me with a question. I'm working on the annual list of future agenda items and hope that when each of the committees meet, we can do a little bit of what you started doing today, which is to make sure I catch all of the things that I need to, because from those of you who were on the wrap up of the last council, it gets pretty frenetic towards the months of November and December. And we'd like to try to avoid that if at all possible. Are there any questions at this time? Are there any future agenda items? Pat.
Yes, Chalene and I, formerly Michelle, and she was not able to continue right now. We are going to be bringing forward a special act about non-citizen voting and municipal elections here in Amherst. And we're hoping to get that on one of the next 2 February agendas.
Okay, and that would be a special act we would file with the legislature.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Anna is joining us as well, I believe.
No.
Huh? Yeah, yes,
She's
no?
gonna be eyes if we want eyes. you know.
Okay, all right.
No,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other future agenda items that people want to bring up right now?
Lynn,
Shallon? Yes.
I just a suggestion. I heard some other towns doing this at the MMA that, there were some very interesting workshops. If we wanted to find time for the counselors to share any insights that we learned, because some of us had very interesting conversations, so we can learn from each other, and also for people who weren't able to attend, it might be an opportunity to share any insights and resources.
And we can do that as the counselor comments, which is C, part of this agenda. Andy? Future agenda items?
Well, what I'm having is, hang on just a second. What I was thinking about could be a future agenda item, or it could be just counselor comments, so I don't know where to put it. But I received correspondence from our key contact in our sister city of Kanagasaki, Japan. And so at some point, I think that we have a couple of things to think about. One is that he was reminding me that this is the 30th anniversary year of our agreement to be a sister city with Kanagasaki, and whether there was anything that we would be doing appropriate to the anniversary. It could just be a resolution of some sort. But the other thing that I think that we really need to think about is what our commitment is to continuing the sister city relationship. But it is something that I think I wanted to at least bring it up today, not with anything specific, but to inform the council, in particular the newest councilors, who may not have had any opportunity whatsoever to know about or interact with Kanagasaki and the sister city, to even know that we had such a relationship. The principal activity of the sister city has been that up until the pandemic, with one exception, and that was the year after the tsunami hit the northern section of Japan where Kanagasaki is located, they have sent a group of students every year who have been hosted by our middle school students with homestays, and have spent several days attending schools and seeing our community. And that is what started the relationship and what has been the principal piece to it. So I just wanted to alert you that the continuation of the sister city is something that is going to have to be thought about, and in any event, what we want to do about acknowledging the 30th anniversary.
Okay, thank you. Dorothy?
Well, I think that we could acknowledge it by actually having a town council visit to our sister city in Japan. That would be somehow a great way to acknowledge it. I have no idea how to do such a thing, but that seems like an obvious thing to do.
Andy, did you want to respond to that?
It's an expensive budget item to be talking about, and I think that it gets into, we really need to be thinking about whether we need, why we have a sister city relationship, and whether it's something we're committed to continuing, and why, before we get into it. We have had small delegations that have gone before, and they have been largely paid for by the people who've attended. And I was probably in the last group, save one, there was one, the schools sent one person in a subsequent visit to work on the exchange program that I was describing. But I went with a group of 4 people for an anniversary event, and had my one and only ever experience of giving a speech to a large audience where I'd had to be translated in real time by somebody who's bilingual and could translate. It was so that in and of itself made it an interesting experience.
Okay, Pam, is this a future agenda item?
It's not, but it's just a general comment. I may be totally off base, but I have not yet seen a picture in town hall of the current town council members, and it's 1 year into our term. Just curious when a photo in the front hall might show up.
I can follow up on that.
Okay. Mandy Jo?
A counselor comment, but I'm going to respond to Pam. The first council didn't get their photo in town hall until the second council was sworn in. Just so you know. That's why I'm laughing. My counselor comments deal with MMA. The conference was wonderful, but if you weren't able to attend, or even if you were, on the MMA website for each of the individual sessions, particularly the breakout sessions and all, are the documents that were presented at those sessions that you can download. So if there's a session that, if you liked 2 sessions and you can only make one and you went, you can see the documents for the other ones. Or if you couldn't go at all, if any of them sound interesting, you can at least download the PowerPoint presentations that were presented during those sessions that might give you some updates and all. And then Lynn mentioned this to me, and so this was a fault of all of us returning counselors that didn't tell the new counselors. There is a counselors association associated with the MMA that is abbreviated MMCA, and it has business meetings at the MMA, but it's a place where you get to meet all of the other town councilors and city councilors in Massachusetts. They do events throughout the year, but anytime it comes through your email from the MMA, it's going to be abbreviated MMCA. So you can go to them because that's your sub association to the MMA of city and town councilors that have this form, the mayor, council, and the council manager forms of governments that are cities throughout the state.
So let's move on to other counselors who want to share comments about MMA. Shalini?
Just a quick question. Some of the slide decks showed locked and I wasn't able to download. So Paul, or if anyone else knows the trick to be able to unlock. Some of them I could download and some of them they had that lock and I could not. So if anyone cracks the code on that, just send us a group email on that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Jennifer?
Yes, I may not be, I don't know, I'm sure that Paul and town staff, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but it was a very interesting, it was a great conference. I especially enjoyed this, the speakers, the Governor spoke, the lieutenant governor, the mayor of Boston, all women. Elizabeth Warren was the only one. She was there by video because she had had surgery. Senator Markey was also there in person, as were the other elected officials I mentioned. And Senator Markey, what struck with me, I wrote it down. He said that the Inflation Reduction Act, he considers the climate action bill. And that, he kept stressing that there is a lot of money for local municipalities in that bill. And he encouraged, the cities and towns that were there to apply for funding. There's $5 billion for greenhouse gas emission reduction, $1.3 billion to set new energy codes. There's a lot of money for charging stations and money for the Chips and Science Act, which isn't necessarily, to fight climate change, but he just was, it was very inspiring, and how much funding is currently available for a lot of our priorities. And I know that our town is terrific at going after funding, but and then he did say you could use ARPA funds, as you know, for grant writers, since we seem to be short in that area. But, I just wanted to share that.
Okay. Other observations about MMA? Shalini?
Yeah, I think there was one of the speakers was from Mass MHA, Mass Housing Affordable Homeownership, and she seemed to have a lot of information about different strategies to encourage affordable housing, and she seemed to be willing to come to our town, or at least over Zoom, to speak to us. And so, Paul, I don't know if that's something we want to follow up at some point.
Okay. Other comments? It was just terrific to be back in person. It was tough because I wore a mask the whole time, but it was just really nice to see people, to be able to talk to the various vendors, to go to the sessions. And at one point, I know, Anna, you wanted to get all of the slides from the finance session and make sure you translate them into Amherst numbers. So
I'm
you
halfway
got
there.
them, right? And they're now available. So, and Paul, I sat next to Earl at one of the final luncheons, and he suggested that were going to ask that he make the presentation he was making at MMA to the council.
Yeah, I think you and I talked about maybe scheduling a special session for the council, if you'd like a 5:30 session to talk about specific initiatives at the council. That would take it out of your meeting time, but it would be optional for councilors. And so we thought about this for CREST, for sustainability, a number of things that might be of interest to the council. So happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Dorothy?
I am going to be writing up something from the MMA, but I don't want to mention it. I will send it all to you when I do it. It's nice. It's nice. But we came home and found our heating was broken. So didn't have a chance to get my thoughts together on that yet. But it was very interesting. And it was also, I must say, lovely. Everyone at the hotel, connected with the hotel, was extremely polite and helpful. And it was fun being in the town of Boston. And Bob and I went to the MFA, and the minute we entered the T as a streetcar, young people leapt out of their seats and just, it was, I was just amazed, absolutely amazed. So it did remind me of Markey's statement that, Massachusetts lures the brightest young people from all around the country to come to Massachusetts and to make us such a, smart state. And I thought, wow, and they're polite too. But I will be writing something and I'll let you know about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Any other comments from counselors in general? I'm happy to note that I'm adjourning the meeting at 8:43.